Be very careful, because how someone treats the powerless, the ignored, the ones who offer nothing in return, reveals everything about who they really are. You might think you know someone because of how they present themselves in the spotlight, but it's in the shadows, in the silence, in the quiet micro moments when they believe no one important is watching, that their true nature is revealed. You want to know someone's soul? Don't watch how they treat their boss. Watch how they treat the janitor. Don't listen to how they speak when trying to impress someone. Listen to how they speak to themselves when everything falls apart. Jung understood this better than anyone. He said the unconscious mind isn't just revealed in dreams or therapy. It's right here, in everyday behavior, hidden in plain sight. When someone is told no, when they don't get what they want, when they're alone with their thoughts, that's when the mask of ego slips, and what's underneath can be astonishing. You've seen it, that shift in tone when someone thinks the other person has nothing to offer them. The fake smile disappears, the impatience surfaces, suddenly they speak sharper, colder, more dismissive, without even realizing it. These are the silent tests of character, and most people fail them without even knowing they were being tested. And if you're honest, maybe you failed them too. Maybe you've said something you didn't mean just because you were stressed. Maybe you've ignored someone who needed you simply because they weren't loud enough to demand your attention. But here's the thing. Those moments are everything. Carl Jung warned that our ego is a fragile mask, a construct, something we wear to function in society, to be liked, accepted, validated. He called it the persona. But that mask, no matter how polished, always begins to crack under pressure. In the moments when we are denied, disappointed, or left alone, the mask slips. And what's left is not who you say you are. It's who you really are. There are 3 moments when someone's soul becomes visible. The first is how they treat people who have no social leverage. Think about the times you've watched someone ignore the waiter, speak over the receptionist, talk down to someone struggling to speak English, or show open frustration at a child, an elderly person, or someone who can't fight back. These aren't harmless acts. They are projections of the unhealed self. Jung said what we repress, what we refuse to integrate into consciousness, we end up projecting onto others. And it's usually those we perceive as beneath us who bear the weight of those projections. If someone disrespects others when there's nothing to gain, what does that say about who they are when the lights go out, when no one is watching? That's the real character test. You can't fake kindness in the shadows. You either have it or you don't. And if you don't, no amount of public image can cover that up forever. The second moment, the one that often exposes our inner wiring, is how we react when told no. It sounds simple, right? But think back. When was the last time you didn't get what you wanted? When a plan fell through? When someone denied you, rejected you, or simply didn't respond? How did you react? Did you retreat into silence, lash out, try to manipulate the situation back in your favor? Or did you breathe, reflect, and accept the moment without collapsing into reaction? Jung believed that the ego takes denial personally, not because the situation is inherently tragic, but because the ego fears losing control. It equates being denied with being rejected, with being unworthy, with being unseen. And if your ego is still ruling you, that denial will trigger you more than it should. You'll feel a wave of disproportionate emotion, not because of what happened, but because of the story it activates inside you. Maybe it's the story that says, "I'm not good enough," or "I always lose," or "people always leave." That story isn't just pain, it's shadow. And here's what makes it more dangerous. If you don't recognize it, you'll start projecting it onto others. You'll accuse people of things they didn't do. You'll sabotage connections before they can grow. You'll punish others for wounds they never caused. Jung taught that what we do not make conscious, we act out unconsciously. And that's why emotional maturity isn't about perfection, it's about response. Can you feel triggered and still stay grounded? Can you feel disappointed and still choose compassion? That's real strength. That's what separates the fragmented from the integrated. The third silent test, and maybe the most intimate of all, is how you speak to yourself when you're alone, no audience, no one to impress, just you and your thoughts. This is where the real war is fought, in the quiet, in the solitude. When you mess up, what's the first thing you say to yourself? You're so stupid? What's wrong with you? Or is it, you're human, it's okay, let's try again? That inner voice isn't random. It's not just a product of personality. It's the echo of your upbringing, your past, your unhealed wounds. It's the internalized voice of every judgment you absorbed and never questioned. If that voice is cruel, critical, constantly disappointed, it means part of you still believes you're unworthy of grace, and that part is the shadow. The inner critic is not your guide, it's your wound pretending to protect you. Jung emphasized that integration, true individuation, isn't about silencing that voice, it's about listening to it, understanding where it came from, and choosing to respond with awareness instead of shame. Because here's the secret no one tells you. How you treat yourself in the silence is exactly how you'll treat others under pressure. If you are cruel to yourself, you'll be cruel to others when your mask falls. If you constantly judge yourself, you will eventually judge others just as harshly. That's why self-compassion isn't weakness, it's training for real character. Think about the last time you sat in silence. No music, no phone, no one speaking to you, just the raw noise of your own mind. Was it peaceful, or did it turn against you? Did the silence feel like rest, or did it become a weapon? This is what most people never admit. Silence doesn't just reveal others, it reveals you. It's because it's been there all along, just waiting for your attention. Jung believed that the unconscious isn't passive, it's active. It shapes your thoughts, your moods, your behaviors, especially when you're not paying attention. That's why inner dialogue matters, not just the words you speak out loud, but the tone you carry internally. If your first instinct when you fail is to punish yourself, then you're still in survival mode. You're still trying to prove that you're worthy by beating yourself into submission. That's not healing, that's re-traumatization. There's a reason Jung called the process of self-discovery individuation, because it's not about fixing the broken pieces. It's about recognizing that even the pieces you hide are part of a larger whole. Integration doesn't happen through denial. It happens through acknowledgement, and nowhere is that more visible than in your relationship with yourself. If your internal voice is still echoing shame, guilt, or self-rejection, then that's what you'll project onto others. Every criticism becomes a personal attack. Every no feels like abandonment. Every delay feels like rejection, not because it is, but because your unconscious has wired you to believe that it must be. This is why how you treat yourself is the hidden curriculum of your life. You can pretend to be kind to others, you can smile and perform generosity, but when you're triggered, when you're tired, when you feel unseen, what comes out then is the truth. And if you've been at war with yourself for years, don't be surprised if your empathy breaks under pressure, because true empathy isn't about performance, it's about recognition. When you've learned to see your own pain without flinching, you stop flinching at other people's pain too. You don't judge them. You don't try to fix them. You simply sit with them because you've learned how to sit with yourself. And that brings us back to projection, one of Jung's most powerful and disturbing truths. He said everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. In other words, the things that get under your skin are often the exact traits you haven't yet faced in yourself. You despise arrogance because you're secretly ashamed of your own confidence. You reject vulnerability in others because you still see it as weakness in yourself. You feel disgusted by neediness because a part of you still remembers what it was like to be desperate and hates that version of you. That's why your triggers are sacred, not because they justify your reactions, but because they reveal your unresolved wounds. The person who gets under your skin is not your enemy, they are your mirror, and yes, that's uncomfortable. But it's also liberating, because once you realize this, You stop wasting energy trying to change others and start doing the deeper work of understanding yourself. When you speak harshly to someone who annoys you, what are you really saying? That they are less than you, or that they're touching a part of you that you'd rather not face? When you ignore someone who can't help you, what are you really expressing? That they don't matter, or that your own value is still tied to what you get, not who you are? Jung didn't call this bad behavior, he called it unconscious behavior, and unconsciousness is not a moral failure, it's a call to awareness. But here's the irony. The more unconscious you are, the more convinced you'll be that you're right. You'll feel morally superior, emotionally justified, like your impatience is someone else's fault, like your coldness is just tough love. But the truth is far less flattering. What you don't heal, you repeat, and what you repeat eventually defines you. That's why character is not shown in the big dramatic moments. It's revealed in the quiet, when no one's watching, when you're not being praised for doing the right thing, when the person in front of you has no power to reward you or post about your kindness or give anything back. That's the test, and your soul knows when you've passed it. You can feel it. There's a stillness that follows integrity, a kind of peace that doesn't need to be explained when your actions align with your values, not your impulses. You begin to reclaim something deeper than approval. You reclaim your essence. And that essence isn't built through performance, it's built through presence, through the moment you choose to respond instead of react, through the times you say no with clarity instead of guilt, through the grace you give to the parts of yourself you once thought made you unworthy. That's when everything changes, because you stop chasing validation and start becoming someone who doesn't need it. Think about the person you admire most, not for what they have, but for how they move through the world. Chances are they have something rare: emotional steadiness, quiet strength, an ability to remain kind without being a doormat. That kind of presence doesn't come from luck. It comes from inner work, from years of facing the shadow instead of pretending it doesn't exist, from learning to hold the tension between ego and soul, and choosing the soul even when it hurts. This is why individuation is not a one-time event. It's a lifelong process. You're not here to become perfect. You're here to become real. And real means flawed. Real means messy. Real means having moments where you fail the test and still choosing to learn from it instead of defend it. That's growth. That's the path. So the next time you're faced with someone who can't help you, who offers nothing but their presence, watch yourself. Not to judge, but to see. How do you respond? Are you impatient, distracted, dismissive? Or are you grounded, present, kind? And when you're told no, when something doesn't go your way, what emerges first? Anger, withdrawal, or curiosity? And when you're alone, really alone, what's the tone of your inner voice? Is it cruel? Is it conditional? Or is it patient, even when you're falling apart? Because that's the real work, not the masks, not the image, but the internal architecture of your emotional life. And you won't find that in books, or in titles, or in external approval. You'll find it in the silence, in the denial, in the solitude. Maybe you've never been taught this, but how you respond in the quiet determines everything about your emotional reality. When the distractions fall away, when there's no one left to impress, you are left with your core. And your core doesn't lie. It doesn't care about your excuses or your justifications. It simply reveals who you are when you're not performing. And that's where your real power begins, or ends. Jung knew that the unconscious mind runs the show until you become conscious of it. That's why your reactions under stress, in silence, in solitude, are not minor moments. They are psychic messages. They are signals from your inner world, showing you where your wounds still live, where your persona still dominates, where your shadow is still being rejected. And if you ignore those signals, life will continue to mirror them back to you through people, through situations, through emotional patterns that repeat until they finally wake you up. So when you find yourself feeling superior to someone who can't benefit you, ask yourself this: what part of you still needs to feel above others in order to feel worthy? When you catch yourself feeling angry after being told no, ask what story is being activated inside you. Is it a story of abandonment, of powerlessness, of not being good enough? These aren't just thoughts, they're the echoes of your inner child, your past trauma, your unprocessed emotions, all trying to find a voice in the present moment. And if you have the courage to sit with that discomfort instead of projecting it, everything changes. You stop being a slave to your impulses. You stop giving your power away to every person, every situation, every emotional high and low. You begin to develop something rare: emotional sovereignty, the ability to hold your center, regardless of who or what is around you. Jung wrote that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Think about that. How many things in your life have felt like fate, like bad luck, like an uncontrollable cycle, when in truth, they were simply the result of unconscious habits, reactions, and patterns you never paused to examine? It's not fate that makes someone explode when they're denied, it's unconscious expectation. It's not fate that causes someone to disrespect the vulnerable, it's unhealed shame looking for a scapegoat. And it's not fate that fills your silence with self-hatred, it's the voice of a shadow you've never turned toward. But here's the good news: what's unconscious can be made conscious. What's hidden can be brought into the light. And what's been rejected can be reclaimed. That's the work of individuation. Not to become someone else, but to become whole. To own your light and your darkness, your brilliance and your brokenness, your strength and your softness. Without apology. Because when you stop rejecting parts of yourself, you stop rejecting those parts in others too. You stop needing people to be perfect to feel safe. You stop punishing others for showing traits that you haven't yet accepted in yourself. You begin to see people for who they are, not through the lens of your fear, but through the clarity of your own self-awareness. And that changes every relationship you have. Suddenly, you're no longer drawn to manipulation disguised as connection. You don't mistake attention for love. You don't chase approval to feel seen, because you've started seeing yourself. And when you see yourself clearly, your standards rise not from ego, but from alignment. You stop tolerating disrespect, not because you're offended, but because you finally understand your worth. You stop over-explaining, not because you're distant, but because your energy is no longer up for negotiation. You stop trying to fix people, not because you've grown cold, but because you understand that real transformation only happens when someone is ready to see their own shadow. So when you look around and notice who shows up for you only when they need something, or who disappears when you're no longer useful, don't panic, don't beg, don't take it personally. See it for what it is: an emotional filter, a way the universe reveals to you who is aligned with your essence and who was only attached to your utility. This is one of the hardest lessons for anyone doing shadow work. The realization that many people don't love you, they love what you give. They love how you make them feel. They love the illusion you've maintained. But when you start changing, when you stop being endlessly available, when you set boundaries, when you treat yourself with dignity, those people fall away, not because you did something wrong, but because you stopped performing the version of you they were comfortable with. And what's left are those rare few who see your depth and stay anyway, who aren't threatened by your silence, who respect your no, who mirror back your maturity instead of draining it. This is why how you treat people when there's nothing to gain isn't just about morality, it's about alignment, it's about integrity, it's about building a life that feels like truth, not performance. And once you taste that kind of life, the old ways become intolerable. You stop pretending to be okay just to keep the peace. You stop explaining your value to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop living on autopilot, giving your time and energy away just to avoid discomfort. Because now you're choosing discomfort with consciousness, not staying in comfort at the cost of your soul. You're not afraid to be the one who speaks up, or the one who walks away, or the one who says nothing when everyone else is shouting, because you've seen what happens when you ignore the whisper of your unconscious. You've seen the cost of abandoning your truth to keep others happy. And now you're done with that. You are not here to be liked by everyone. You're here to become whole. You're not here to maintain an image. You're here to face what's real. You're not here to silence your intuition. You're here to trust it, to follow it, even when it leads you away from the familiar. Because the real test of character doesn't come with a warning. It comes in silence, in moments of tension, rejection, solitude. And if you can stay conscious in those moments, if you can choose presence over projection, response over reaction, truth over image, you won't just pass the test, you'll transform through it. And that transformation doesn't come in a flash of enlightenment or a single act of insight. It comes in the repetition, the everyday decision to stay awake, even when it's easier to go numb, to stay compassionate even when others are cold, to hold your boundaries even when you feel the pull of guilt or the fear of being misunderstood. These aren't grand, heroic gestures, but they build a kind of inner architecture that becomes unshakable over time. Most people will never notice the depth of work it takes to be kind when you're exhausted, to stay grounded when you're triggered, to say no without defending it. But that's okay. This isn't about performance, it's about integrity. You're not doing it to be praised, you're doing it because your soul demands it. Because once you've started seeing the difference between who you pretend to be and who you truly are, you can't go back to the mask, it doesn't fit anymore. Jung said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, and that journey isn't just about finding your passion or healing your childhood wounds. It's about examining how you move through the world when nobody is affirming you, when you're not being congratulated for being a good person, when the only witness to your behavior is your own conscience. That's the measure of true maturity, not in what you do when everything is going well, but in who you are when life withholds its rewards. There's a kind of purity in how you treat someone who cannot help you, because there's no social script for that. No performance to maintain, no ego benefit to harvest. It's just you, stripped of the usual incentives, faced with a choice. Do I show up with presence, or do I dismiss this moment as unimportant? But here's the truth. There are no unimportant moments. There is no such thing as just a small interaction. Every moment you have with another human being is an opportunity to reinforce who you are becoming, or who you've been trying not to be. That's the gravity of everyday life. It's not in the big dramatic events, it's in the checkout line. It's in the way you respond to interruptions. It's in how you react when your partner is too tired to meet your emotional needs. It's in how you treat someone who misunderstands you, or corrects you, or simply doesn't see you. These are the places where the unconscious is revealed, not because you intended to expose it, but because you weren't guarding it. This is why awareness is everything, because awareness gives you choice. Without it, you're just a puppet to your own programming, repeating inherited behaviors, echoing pain that never belonged to you in the first place. But with awareness, you start to see the space between the trigger and your response, and in that space is your power. That space is where ego loses its grip. That space is where individuation begins. Individuation isn't about becoming better than others. It's about becoming whole within yourself. That means owning your shadow, not just the pain and anger, but also the jealousy, the pride, the superiority. Those moments when you feel secretly pleased to see someone fail, when you withdraw affection to punish, when you speak over someone just to reassert control. These are not moral failures. They're invitations, they're doorways into your deeper psyche, and if you dare to walk through them, what you'll find is not just more shadow, but also more soul. Because your shadow isn't just where your wounds live, it's where your power lives. It holds the parts of you that were rejected, shamed, or silenced, but never lost. And when you reintegrate those parts, you stop leaking energy through projection. You stop outsourcing your self-worth. You stop abandoning yourself in order to feel safe in the world. And in that reclaiming, something sacred emerges: self-trust. Self-trust is the foundation of emotional freedom. When you know who you are, you're no longer desperate to prove it. When you've owned your imperfections, you're no longer afraid of being exposed. When you've faced your own cruelty, you're no longer obsessed with appearing kind. You don't have to curate an image. You simply live in truth. And that truth radiates through every interaction, every decision, every silence. So how do you build that self-trust? You start by telling the truth to yourself first. You admit when you've acted from fear. You acknowledge when you've manipulated someone for comfort or control. You own the moments when your kindness was conditional. And you do so without judgment, because this isn't about shaming the past. It's about understanding it, about learning the language of your unconscious so you can rewrite the script instead of repeating it. That's the shift from reactivity to responsibility, from ego to awareness, from performance to presence. And once you make that shift, even once, you'll feel the difference. You'll feel it in your nervous system, in your relationships, in the way your energy stabilizes. You'll stop feeling like you're constantly leaking, constantly compensating, constantly exhausted, because you've finally started living in alignment. And that alignment speaks louder than words ever could. It shows up in your tone, in your eyes, in the way people feel when they're around you. They might not be able to explain it, but they'll sense it, that you're not performing, that you don't need them to validate you, that you're grounded in something deeper than external approval. And that kind of presence, it's magnetic, not because you're trying to attract, but because you've become safe in your own skin. This is the paradox Jung understood so well, that the more you try to be good, the more fragmented you become. But the more you strive to be whole, to integrate your light and shadow, the more truly good you become, not because you're following a moral rule book, but because you're living from soul, and the soul doesn't need to dominate or manipulate or pretend. It simply is. And that isness, that authenticity, is what gives you power that cannot be taken, only deepened. So when you think about your journey, don't measure it by how often you fall. Measure it by how honestly you reflect afterward. Don't count how many times you've reacted. Ask how many times you've chosen to respond differently. Growth isn't about never failing the test. It's about recognizing the test and deciding, again and again, to rise into a more conscious version of yourself. That's the invitation Jung left us with, not to escape the unconscious, but to partner with it, to stop fearing our darkness and start conversing with it, to stop seeking salvation outside and begin the work of inner reconciliation. That's where the gold is, not in being flawless, but in being integrated. And every time you treat someone with respect when you don't have to, every time you stay present instead of reactive, every time you hold your silence instead of reaching for control, you are doing this work quietly, powerfully, from the inside out. And when that work becomes your way of being, not just something you do in crisis or retreat to after collapse, but your default, your foundation, then you know you've crossed a threshold most people never even approach. The threshold of radical self-awareness. The place where you don't just notice your triggers, you trace them. You don't just feel shame, you question it. You don't just strive for virtue, you become whole, not in the eyes of others, but in the deepest layers of your psyche. This is where power shifts from being something external to something internal. Most people are still trapped in the illusion that power is control, that it's influence or intimidation or status. But real power is this: choosing peace when you're invited into chaos, offering presence when your ego wants to withdraw, speaking truth when silence would protect your image, or holding silence when speaking would only serve your pride. That's sovereignty. That's the kind of strength the world cannot see, but always feels. Carl Jung didn't write these truths to flatter us. He didn't offer easy answers or spiritual cliches. He offered depth. He offered mirrors, and those mirrors are often hard to look into, especially the ones that reveal how quickly we abandon our values when we're uncomfortable. But that discomfort is your access point. It's the gateway to the unconscious. The invitation to explore the parts of you that still live in darkness, not to shame them, but to understand them, because nothing heals through rejection. Everything heals through integration. So next time life denies you something, stop. Don't rush to fix it. Don't spiral into frustration. Don't escape into distraction. Just observe. Notice what story begins to unfold in your mind. Notice what feeling gets activated in your body. And instead of reacting to the world, reflect on your wiring. Ask yourself, who am I right now? What part of me is speaking? Is it my wounded child, my perfectionist, my abandoned self? And then breathe. You're not here to punish yourself for these parts. You're here to love them back into wholeness. That's what Jung meant when he said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. You don't need to be someone else. You don't need to erase your imperfections. You just need to stop pretending they don't exist and start meeting them with compassion. Compassion isn't the soft option. It's the most radical act of power there is, because it requires presence. It requires you to stay. To stay when you want to run. To listen when you want to defend. To forgive when your ego demands vengeance. Compassion is the language of the individuated soul. It's not weakness, it's mastery. And as you start to live this way, as you bring this self-awareness into your interactions, your decisions, your silences, you will begin to notice something. The world around you will shift, not because it's changed, but because you have. You'll start to see projection where you once saw betrayal. You'll sense woundedness behind aggression. You'll recognize in others the very shadows you've worked to reclaim in yourself, and from that place, your presence becomes healing, not by fixing others, but by no longer being triggered by them. There's a kind of beauty in this that words can barely hold, a kind of quiet nobility that rises when you stop reacting and start responding, when you stop judging and start observing, when you stop fearing your shadow and start learning from it. You become unshakable not because life stops hurting, but because your relationship to pain has changed. You understand now that life isn't testing you to punish you. It's revealing you to yourself. It's showing you where your work is, where your integrity cracks under pressure, where your empathy evaporates under ego, where your self-worth is still tied to how others treat you. And if you accept that invitation, if you rise to that level of reflection instead of resentment, you begin to rewrite the story of who you are. You become someone who can be trusted with silence, with solitude, with disappointment, and with power. Not because you're perfect, but because you are aware. And that awareness becomes your compass. It guides you when the path is unclear. It steadies you when emotion tries to overtake you. It reminds you that everything you do, every tone, every glance, every internal narrative is an expression of your unconscious until you make it conscious. And this is what it all comes back to. How you treat people who can't help you is not a reflection of them. It's a reflection of your unconscious. It's your inner world made visible. It's the clearest mirror of your soul. When no one is watching, when no reward is waiting, when the person in front of you can give you nothing, that's when you show yourself who you are. That's the moment that either reveals your ego or your evolution. So the next time you're in a hurry and someone is slow, pause. The next time someone misunderstands you, instead of defending yourself, breathe. The next time you feel the urge to lash out, withdraw, prove, dominate, impress, remember this. Your silence speaks volumes. Your kindness when it cost you something, that's your character. Your reaction to being denied, that's your maturity. Your self-talk when no one else can hear you, that's your healing. You don't need applause for these things. They are sacred. They are for you, because no one can take that kind of strength from you. No one can fake that kind of wholeness, and no one can give it to you either. You earn it. In every small decision, every subtle moment, every unconscious impulse you bring into awareness and transform into intention. So start now. Start with one quiet choice, one conscious breath, one act of kindness no one will ever see. Because in those moments, your soul is watching, and it remembers everything.